One human soldier against 1,000 alien invaders, with the entire future of humanity at stake. Vincent Shaw sat hunched over the bar, tossing back shots of whiskey like they were water. The bartender eyed him warily, noticing the haunted look in Vincent's eyes, the look of a man who had seen too much. "What's eating you, buddy?" the bartender asked, pouring another shot. "You look like you've been through hell." Vincent let out a humorless chuckle. "Hell, that's one way to put it. I was a soldier once in the Terran Defense Force. We were fighting the Tak-Tak, these ruthless alien bastards who wanted to wipe us out. I still remember my first mission on the planet Zelos." The scene shifts years into the past. A younger Vincent, fresh out of basic training, is strapped into a dropship hurtling towards Zelos, a human colony under siege by the Tak-Tak. The Tak-Tak have already slaughtered most of the human defenders and civilians. Vincent's unit is the last hope, sent to evacuate any survivors and hold off the aliens long enough for the ships to escape. But as the dropship touches down, all hell breaks loose. Tak-Tak anti-aircraft fire rips through the ship, sending it crashing to the ground in a ball of flames. Vincent barely escapes before the ship explodes, the heat searing his back as he runs. He finds himself alone, surrounded by the burning ruins of the colony, bodies of humans and Tak-Tak littering the streets. In the distance, he sees a massive Tak-Tak army marching towards him, 1,000 strong, led by their fearsome warlord, Pixis. Vincent checks his rifle and grenades, the only weapons he has left. He's hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, but he knows he's the only thing standing between the Tak-Tak and the human evacuation ships. If he can't hold them off, every last human on Zelos will die. He grits his teeth and takes up position, ready to make his final stand. He'll buy as much time as he can for his fellow humans to escape, even if it costs him his life. The fate of Zelos, and perhaps all of humanity, rests on the shoulders of one human soldier against 1,000 alien invaders. Vincent ducked behind a shattered concrete wall, his heart pounding in his chest. He peeked over the top, scanning the ruins for any signs of movement. In the distance, he spotted a Tak-Tak scout party, a dozen strong, moving cautiously through the rubble. They were searching for survivors, no doubt to slaughter them like they had the rest of the colony. Vincent knew he had to take them out quietly, or risk alerting the main Tak-Tak force to his position. He crept from cover to cover, using the twisted metal and broken stone to conceal his approach. As he drew closer, he pulled out his combat knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. One by one, Vincent stalked and killed the scouts. He slit their throats, stabbed them through the gaps in their armor, always careful to lower their bodies gently to the ground to avoid making noise. As he took down the last scout, he noticed their weapons, advanced plasma rifles far superior to his own battered gun. Vincent grabbed one of the rifles, feeling its heft in his hands. He checked the charge, nearly full. A stroke of luck. He also snagged a few plasma grenades from the scouts' belts. He had a feeling he'd need the extra firepower. Suddenly, a guttural roar split the air behind him. Vincent spun, rifle raised, to see a hulking Tak-Tak warrior bearing down on him, a crackling energy axe held high. Vincent barely managed to roll aside as the axe cleaved through the wall he'd been crouched behind a split second before, melting the concrete like wax. Vincent fired his new rifle, but the plasma bolt splashed harmlessly off the warrior's thick armor. The Tak-Tak swung again, and this time Vincent was a hair too slow. The axe carved a burning line across his side, and he couldn't suppress a scream of pain. But the pain only seemed to sharpen Vincent's focus, honing his determination to a razor's edge. As the warrior raised his axe for a killing blow, Vincent dove forward, sliding under the swing and coming up behind his foe. He jammed his rifle into a gap in the back of the Tak-Tak's armor and pulled the trigger, again and again until the warrior toppled, smoke pouring from his ruined armor. Vincent hastily slapped a medkit patch over his bleeding side, gritting his teeth against the sting of the antiseptic. He knew the sounds of battle would have alerted the main Tak-Tak force. They'd be on him in minutes. He needed to move, to find a more defensible position, somewhere he could make his last stand count. Grimacing, Vincent pushed himself to his feet and staggered deeper into the ruins, leaving a trail of glistening red blood behind him. The fight was far from over, and he still had a job to do: buy time for the human evacuation ships, no matter the cost, even if that cost was his own life. Vincent limped his way into the colony's central plaza, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His side burned with every step, but he pushed on, knowing he was the only thing standing between the Tak-Tak and the evacuation ships. He spotted a makeshift barricade, hastily constructed by the previous defenders before they were slaughtered. Vincent took cover behind it, grunting as he lowered himself to the ground. He began to reinforce the barricade, piling rubble and debris to shore up the weak points. As he worked, a distant sound reached his ears, the pounding of Tak-Tak war drums growing louder with each passing second. They were coming, and in force. Vincent cursed under his breath and redoubled his efforts. He planted a few plasma mines around the barricade, hoping to thin their numbers before they reached him. He also scavenged weapons from the fallen defenders, including a heavy plasma machine gun, which he mounted on the barricade. No sooner had he finished his preparations than the first wave of Tak-Tak came into view, charging towards him with guttural war cries. Vincent gritted his teeth and opened fire with the machine gun, the plasma bolts cutting through the Tak-Tak ranks like a scythe through wheat. Dozens fell, but more kept coming, heedless of their fallen comrades. Some hurled plasma grenades at Vincent's position, forcing him to duck down as explosions rocked the barricade. When the smoke cleared, Vincent saw that a section of the barricade had been blown open, creating a gap in his defenses. He grabbed his rifle and began picking off Tak-Tak as they tried to pour through the breach. But for everyone he killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. They just kept coming, an endless tide of scales and claws and gnashing teeth. Vincent knew he couldn't hold them off forever. Suddenly a deafening roar sounded from behind the Tak-Tak lines. The warriors parted, revealing a monstrous sight, a gigantic Tak-Tak war beast with a massive plasma cannon mounted on its back. The cannon began to glow and hum as it charged up, preparing to annihilate Vincent's position. Vincent felt his blood run cold. If that cannon fired, it would be all over. The barricade, the evacuation ships, everything would be obliterated. He needed to take out that war beast, and fast, or else all would be lost. Vincent's heart raced as the war beast's cannon glowed brighter, about to unleash a devastating blast. He had mere seconds to act. Vincent grabbed a plasma grenade and grappling hook from his belt. He took aim at the tall building across the plaza and fired the hook. It caught on the edge with a satisfying clang. Vincent hit the retract button, and the cable yanked him off his feet, launching him into the air. The war beast's cannon fired with a deafening boom, obliterating Vincent's barricade in a blinding flash. The heat from the blast singed his back as he swung away. Tak-Tak plasma bolts whizzed past Vincent as he arced through the air. At the peak of his swing, Vincent released the cable. His momentum carried him in a soaring leap directly onto the war beast's back. He slammed down behind the still-smoking plasma cannon. The beast roared in fury, bucking and thrashing to throw Vincent off. He clung on desperately, fumbling with the plasma grenade. Vincent armed the charge and jammed the grenade deep into the cannon's barrel. Then he leapt clear, hitting the ground in a bone-jarring roll. A heartbeat later, the grenade detonated. The explosion ripped through the war beast from within, tearing it apart in a spray of flesh and metal. Tak-Tak warriors scattered as flaming debris rained down. Vincent staggered to his feet amid the chaos. He spotted the war beast's plasma cannon lying in the rubble, miraculously intact. He snatched it up and spun to face the Tak-Tak horde. Scores of warriors fell with each earth-shattering blast from the cannon. Their armor melted and flesh vaporized under the onslaught. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. But then, through the smoke, Vincent saw a smaller group of Tak-Tak breaking away from the main force. With growing horror, he realized they were heading for the human evacuation ships, aiming to slaughter the defenseless civilians. Pixis had outmaneuvered him, sending this flanking force while Vincent was occupied with the main army. Now he faced a terrible choice. If he pursued the flanking force, The Tak-Tak warriors here would overrun his position, and he would be cut down. But if he stayed to hold them off, the civilians at the evacuation site would be slaughtered. There was no time for indecision. Vincent had to act, and act now. But either choice could mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat, for himself and for the last survivors of Zelos. The fate of everything rested on this split-second decision. Vincent spun on his heel and sprinted toward the evacuation ships, his heart pounding as he fired his plasma cannon behind him at the pursuing Tak-Tak. The warriors gave chase, their guttural roars echoing through the ruins, but Vincent's enhanced combat suit propelled him forward with superhuman speed and agility. He leapt over debris and craters, always staying one step ahead of his pursuers. As he neared the evacuation area, a scene of utter chaos unfolded before him. The Tak-Tak flanking force had already reached the civilian ships and were laying waste to them with their advanced weapons. Several ships lay in burning ruins, and the screams of the dying filled the air. Without hesitation, Vincent charged into the fray, his plasma cannon spitting death. Each blast vaporized Tak-Tak warriors, their armor no match for the cannon's might. Vincent wove through the battle, drawing the Tak-Tak's fire away from the civilians and onto himself. Inspired by Vincent's bravery, the civilians rallied. They grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Plasma rifles from fallen Tak-Tak, makeshift clubs, even sharpened debris, and surged forward to join the fight. Side by side, the soldier and the civilians fought, holding back the Tak-Tak onslaught. Under their combined might, the Tak-Tak began to fall back. Ship after ship blasted off, carrying the survivors to safety. But even as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. Pixis, the dreaded Tak-Tak warlord, strode onto the battlefield, heading straight for the last evacuation ship. Civilians rushed to stop him, but Pixis cut them down effortlessly, his plasma sword a blur of deadly light. Vincent knew if Pixis reached that final ship, everyone on board would be slaughtered. He had to act now. Charging his cannon, Vincent ran at Pixis, unleashing a barrage of plasma. Pixis whirled, deflecting the blasts with his sword, but the force of the impact drove him back, away from the ship. Seizing his chance, Vincent leapt, soaring over the heads of the battling forces, to land between Pixis and the ship. He stood tall, cannon at the ready, staring down the Tak-Tak leader. Pixis laughed, a cruel clicking sound. "Foolish human," he hissed, mandibles twitching. "You think you can defeat me? I have slain 1,000 of your kind." Vincent met Pixis's gaze, a grin spreading across his face as he retracted his helmet. "Yeah," he said, voice steady despite the chaos around them, "but you haven't slain me." He raised his cannon, aiming it straight at Pixis's head. The warlord raised his sword in response, the two warriors poised on the brink of a clash that would decide the fate of all on Zelos. The tension in the air was palpable, the momentary lull in the fighting seeming to stretch for an eternity. Then, with a roar from Pixis and a battle cry from Vincent, the two champions charged, cannon and sword ready to meet in a battle that would be remembered for generations. The final confrontation had begun. Vincent and Pixis clashed in a whirlwind of plasma and steel, their weapons crackling with each impact. Pixis was a blur of motion, his four arms wielding his plasma sword with blinding speed and precision. Vincent found himself on the defensive, barely able to parry the relentless onslaught. Around them, the battle raged on, the sounds of weapons fire and screams filling the air. The civilians fought bravely alongside Vincent, but they were outmatched by the Tak-Tak warriors. Vincent knew he had to end this duel quickly, or all would be lost. He feinted left, then swung his cannon with all his might. The blow caught Pixis off guard, knocking his sword aside. Seizing the opening, Vincent lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the warlord's chest. Pixis staggered back, his armor cracked by the force of the impact. Vincent pressed his advantage, raining blows down on Pixis with his cannon. The Tak-Tak leader managed to deflect most of them, but Vincent could see he was slowing, his movements becoming sluggish. Suddenly, Pixis lashed out with a kick, catching Vincent in the stomach and sending him flying. He crashed to the ground, his cannon skittering out of reach. In an instant, Pixis was on him, his sword raised for a killing blow. But Vincent wasn't finished yet. As the blade descended, he rolled aside, feeling the heat of the plasma as it missed him by inches. His hand scrabbled in the dirt, grabbing a fistful of dust and hurling it into Pixis's eyes. The warlord reeled back, momentarily blinded. Vincent seized his chance, diving for his cannon and coming up firing. The plasma bolt caught Pixis square in the face, vaporizing his head in a gory explosion. For a moment, there was silence. Then, as Pixis's headless corpse toppled backwards, a great cry went up from the civilians. The remaining Tak-Tak, seeing their leader fall, turned and fled, their courage broken. As the last evacuation ship lifted off, carrying the survivors to safety, Vincent stood atop a mound of Tak-Tak bodies. His armor was shattered, his body bruised and bloody, but he had emerged victorious. Against all odds, one human soldier had defeated an army of 1,000. But even as the civilians celebrated, Vincent knew this was only the beginning. The Tak-Tak would return with even greater numbers and determination to eradicate humanity, and he would be there to meet them, ready to fight and die for his species, no matter the cost. The narrator paused, his eyes distant as if seeing the battlefield once more. And that, he said, was the legend of Vincent Shaw, the hero of Zelos, but his story and the war was far from over. As the last evacuation ship broke atmosphere, Vincent's calm crackled to life. "Sergeant Shaw, this is Command. Do you read?" Vincent tapped his earpiece. "I read you, Command. Go ahead." "First, let me congratulate you on your incredible victory down there. What you did was nothing short of miraculous. However, I'm afraid the battle for Zelos isn't over yet." Vincent frowned. "What do you mean? The civilians are safe. The Tak-Tak army is in ruins. Our orbital scans have detected a massive Tak-Tak fleet heading your way, no doubt drawn by the distress signals from Paxis's forces. It's too large for our remaining ships to handle. I'm sorry, Vincent, but we're going to have to abandon Zelos." "Understood, Command. I'll make my way to the extraction point." "Not so fast, Sergeant. We have one last mission for you. Our scans have also detected a strange energy signature coming from a Tak-Tak facility near your position. We believe it may be a new weapon they're developing, something that could turn the tide of the war in their favor. We need you to infiltrate that facility, find out what you can about this weapon, and destroy it if possible." Vincent took a deep breath. He was exhausted, battered, bleeding, but he was a soldier of terror. He had a duty to fulfill. "Understood, Command. I'm on it. Shaw out." The narrator paused, sipping a glass of water before continuing. So, alone and armed only with his trusty plasma cannon, Vincent set off towards the Tak-Tak facility. As he approached, he saw that the place was a fortress, heavily guarded by Tak-Tak warriors and automated defense turrets. A frontal assault would have been suicide. But Vincent was no ordinary soldier. Waiting for the cover of night, he activated his suit's cloaking device, vanishing from sight. Silent as a shadow, he slipped past the patrols and into the facility. Inside, Vincent crept through the corridors, dodging guards and security systems. He found a computer terminal and jacked in, his suit systems bypassing the Tak-Tak security and downloading everything he could find on this new weapon. The narrator's voice grew grim. What Vincent discovered chilled him to his very core. The Tak-Tak were developing a planet killer, a device capable of destroying an entire world in a single shot. If they completed it, no human colony would be safe. Vincent knew he had to destroy it here and now, or all would be lost. Moving with renewed urgency, Vincent planted explosives at key structural points throughout the facility. Then, cannon at the ready, he stormed the weapons control room, catching the Tak-Tak scientists by surprise. The narrator mimed firing a gun. It was a fierce battle, plasma bolts flying back and forth, but Vincent was a one-man army, unstoppable in his determination. In the end, he stood victorious amongst the fallen Tak-Tak. Not wasting a moment, Vincent armed the explosives and raced out of the facility, the timer ticking down. He barely made it clear of the blast radius before the charges detonated, reducing the entire facility to rubble. The planet killer was destroyed, The threat eliminated, for now. Vincent contacted command to report his success, then found a place to hunker down and await extraction, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. For he knew this was just one battle in a much larger war, a war for the very survival of humanity, and he would keep fighting no matter the cost until the end. As Vincent waited for extraction, his suit's sensors suddenly blared a proximity warning. An incoming Tak-Tak dropship, no doubt coming to investigate the destruction of their facility. Vincent cursed under his breath. He couldn't let himself be captured, not with the vital information he carried. He scanned his surroundings, spotting a defensible position among the rubble. He sprinted over and took cover, cannon at the ready. The Tak-Tak dropship touched down with a roar of engines. The hatch hissed open, and dozens of warriors poured out, weapons bristling. But they weren't just any warriors. Leading the charge was a massive, scarred Tak-Tak that Vincent recognized instantly from intelligence reports. Kravox, Pixis's brutal second-in-command. Known for his cruelty and his burning hatred of humanity, Vincent knew he wouldn't go down easily. The Tak-Tak fanned out, searching the ruins for survivors. It didn't take them long to spot Vincent. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, chewing up the rubble around him, but Vincent's position was solid, and he coolly returned fire, his cannon spitting sun-bright death. Several Tak-Tak fell, their armor no match for Vincent's precision shots, but Kravox was too cunning to let his forces be whittled down. He barked orders, and the Tak-Tak began to flank Vincent, coming at him from multiple angles. Vincent was forced into motion, ducking and weaving through the rubble as plasma bolts crackled past. He fired on the move, each shot a calculated risk. As he fought, Vincent's eyes fell on a damaged Tak-Tak dropship nearby. Its fuel cells had ruptured, wisps of volatile plasma leaking out. An idea formed, desperate and dangerous. Vincent let the Tak-Tak drive him back, feigning exhaustion and weakness. He stumbled, his cannon fire going wide. Kravox saw his chance, the chance to end the human who had slain his warlord. With a bellowing roar, the massive Tak-Tak charged, plasma blade held high. Vincent waited until Kravox was almost on top of him, until he could see the hate burning in the alien's eyes. Then he dove aside in a desperate roll, coming up past the wrecked dropship. He swung his cannon around and fired, not at Kravox but at the leaking fuel cells. The explosion was tremendous, a searing ball of plasma that engulfed Kravox and the nearby Tak-Tak. The force of the blast threw Vincent back, sending him crashing to the ground. His armor was scorched, warning lights flashing across his HUD, but it had held. Groaning, Vincent pushed himself up, ready to continue the fight. But as the smoke cleared, he saw that the explosion had decimated the Tak-Tak forces. Most lay dead or dying, and the few survivors were in full retreat, their will to fight shattered by the loss of their leader. For a moment, Vincent allowed himself to feel a flicker of triumph. But it was short-lived. In the distance, his sensors picked up the approach of more Tak-Tak dropships. He was battered, his armor compromised, his cannons charged, nearly depleted. He knew he couldn't survive another onslaught. Vincent prepared to make his final stand, to sell his life as dearly as he could. But just as the Tak-Tak ships came into view, he heard the roar of friendly engines. He looked up to see a Terran dropship descending from the sky, his extraction finally arriving. The dropship touched down and Vincent limped aboard, his mission complete but his body battered and broken. As the ship lifted off, carrying him away from the surface of Zelos, Vincent looked down at the planet that had nearly been humanity's grave. He knew this was only the beginning. The Tak-Tak would keep coming, their desire to exterminate humanity unquenched. But he also knew that as long as soldiers like him stood ready to fight and die, humanity would never fall. The battle for Zelos was over, but the war for survival had only just begun. The dropship's engines hummed as it carried Vincent away from the surface of Zelos. In the cargo hold, a medic tended to Vincent's wounds, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger fight. As if reading his thoughts, the dropship's calm crackled to life. Sergeant Shaw, report to the briefing room immediately. Vincent hauled himself to his feet, ignoring the medic's protests, and made his way to the briefing room. There he found his superiors waiting for him, their faces grim. Sergeant Shaw, one of them began, your actions on Zelos were nothing short of heroic. You dealt the Tak-Tak a significant blow. However, the information you uncovered about this planet-killer weapon is deeply concerning. Another superior chimed in. We fear that the destruction of the facility on Zelos may have only delayed the Tak-Tak's plans, not stopped them entirely. Intelligence suggests they have a second planet-killer weapon in development at a secret base deep in their territory. Vincent felt a chill run down his spine. If the Tak-Tak completed this weapon, it could mean the end of humanity. The first superior leaned forward. Vincent, we have a new mission for you. You are to infiltrate this secret base, confirm the existence of the weapon, and destroy it by any means necessary. Vincent didn't hesitate. I understand, sir. I'll do whatever it takes. The superior nodded. Make no mistake, Sergeant, this is likely a one-way trip, but if anyone can complete this mission, it's you. As Vincent prepared for his new mission, a mysterious figure was escorted into his quarters. A Tak-Tak, but not like any Vincent had seen before. This one wore no armor, and its posture was one of submission, not aggression. I am Zaxor, the Tak-Tak said. I come with information about the planet-killer weapon, information that could help you destroy it. Vincent's hand hovered over his sidearm. And why would you help me? Why betray your own kind? Zaxor met Vincent's gaze. Because I believe this war is a mistake. The path of conquest will only lead to more death, more suffering. I believe we should seek peace with humanity. Vincent was unconvinced. The Tak-Tak were ruthless, untrustworthy. This could easily be a trap. Zaxor seemed to sense Vincent's doubts. I know I am asking for a great deal of trust, but I'm willing to risk everything to end this conflict. Please, let me help you. Against his better judgment, Vincent agreed. He would work with Zaxor, but he would watch him closely. At the first sign of betrayal, he wouldn't hesitate to put the Tak-Tak down. Infiltrating the Tak-Tak base was a harrowing ordeal. Vincent and Zaxor had to evade patrols, bypass security systems, and fight their way through when stealth failed. But finally, they reached the heart of the facility. And there it was, the planet-killer weapon, a monstrous device pulsing with malevolent energy. Vincent set to work planting his explosives, while Zaxor watched the door. Did you really think I would betray my own kind, human? Zaxor sneered. You are even more foolish than I thought. Before Vincent could react, Zaxor fired. The stun blast hit Vincent square in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground, his vision blurring. Through the haze he could hear Zaxor's mocking laughter. The weapon is complete, human. Ready to fire, your species will be nothing more than dust. Vincent tried to rise, but his body wouldn't obey. The stun blast had paralyzed him. Helpless, he could only watch as Zaxor moved to the weapon's control panel. This was it. He had failed. The Tak-Tak would wipe out humanity, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As darkness closed in around him, Vincent's last thought was of home, of the billions of lives he had sworn to protect. The narrator's voice was heavy with emotion as he recounted Vincent's plight. With Vincent incapacitated, it seemed all hope was lost. Zaxor had played his hand masterfully, and now the fate of humanity hung by a thread. The planet-killer weapon was primed and ready, and Vincent, our last and best hope, lay helpless before it. It seemed the Tak-Tak's victory was assured, and our species was doomed to extinction, unless... Vincent fought against the paralysis with every ounce of his will. His muscles screamed in protest as he forced himself to move, inch by painful inch. Zaxor's mocking laughter echoed in his ears, spurring him on. With a burst of desperate strength, Vincent lunged at the Tak-Tak traitor. They crashed to the ground, Zaxor's laughter turning to shrieks of rage and surprise. They grappled, rolling across the control room floor. Vincent's human strength, born of a lifetime of training and hardship, was pitted against Zaxor's alien physiology. Vincent's hand closed around Zaxor's stun blaster. With a roar of effort, he wrenched it from the Tak-Tak's grasp. He brought the weapon up, jamming it under Zaxor's chin, and pulled the trigger. The blast illuminated Zaxor's shocked face for a split second before he went limp. But even as Zaxor fell, his hand lashed out, striking a button on a nearby console. An alarm began to blare, the sound drilling into Vincent's skull. He knew that sound, knew it meant reinforcements were on their way. Vincent staggered to his feet, his body still shaking off the effects of the stun blast. He turned to the planet-killer weapon, looming over him like a monument to destruction. He had to destroy it, no matter the cost. He stumbled to the weapon's control panel, his vision blurring. The firing sequence had already begun, the screen flashing with dire warnings. Vincent's heart sank. He was too late. He couldn't stop it. But maybe, just maybe, he could still make a difference. With fingers that felt like lead, Vincent inputted new coordinates into the targeting system, the location of the Tak-Tak base. If he couldn't save humanity, he could at least take the Tak-Tak down with him. Alarms blared, louder and more insistent, the sound of pounding feet of Tak-Tak warriors approaching. Vincent sealed the door to the control room, the lock engaging with a reassuring clunk. It wouldn't hold them for long, but it might buy him a few precious seconds. The planet-killer weapon thrummed with power, the very air seeming to vibrate. Energy levels spiked, the readings on the screens climbing higher and higher. Vincent knew he had only moments left. He activated his suit's recording device, the tiny camera blinking to life. He took a breath, trying to steady his voice. "This is Sergeant Vincent Shaw," he began. "If you're hearing this, then my mission has failed. The planet-killer weapon is active, and I was unable to stop it." He paused, swallowing hard. "But I have changed its target. The weapon will fire on this base, destroying the Tak-Tak and their creation. It's a small victory, but it's all I could do." His voice grew firmer, more resolute. "To my superiors, to all of humanity, I say this: keep fighting. No matter how dark things seem, no matter how hopeless, never give up. As long as we stand together, as long as we refuse to yield, the Tak-Tak will never triumph." The planet-killer weapon reached critical mass, the room filling with a blinding light. Vincent closed his eyes, picturing Earth. The green fields, the blue skies, the faces of his comrades, of all those he fought to protect. "It has been an honor to serve," Vincent said. "Sergeant Shaw signing off." The weapon fired, a lance of pure energy erupting from the base. It consumed everything in its path, the Tak-Tak warriors, their ships, the planet itself. And at the heart of it all, Vincent Shaw, the soldier who had given everything for his species. In a Terran command ship light years away, a console beeped with an incoming transmission. An officer opened the file and Vincent's face appeared on the screen. As his final message played, the bridge fell silent. Tears were shed, heads were bowed. But even in their grief, there was a resolve. Vincent's sacrifice would not be in vain. Humanity would fight on in his memory and in the memory of all those who had fallen. The war was far from over, but today, one battle had been won. And as long as there were those like Vincent Shaw, those willing to stand against the darkness no matter the cost, there was still hope. Hope for victory, hope for peace. Hope for humanity's future. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.